Good afternoon, everybody. This afternoon's proceedings, apart from a short private session at the end, will be transmitted after the usual 10-minute delay. Those with mobile telephones may use them to report what they're hearing in the hearing room, but only after 10 minutes have elapsed since the event that they're reporting. They may not be used for recording or photography. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Hastings, we left before lunch on the 20th of November 2006, and that email exchange that you'd had with Maya, in particularly where she said that she contemplated taking lots of sleeping pills and flirting with death. You did respond to that email, and we looked at that email. On the same night, is it true, and I'm going to bring up a document, if I may, UCPI 39755. This is a witness statement produced by Ben Leamy, a core participant in this inquiry. Page 13, please, paragraph 5.2. And he presents evidence that on the 20th of November, so that same evening, you spent a significant amount of time online putting on posts, trivial posts on Urban 75, posting about the Urban 9 CD swap that we've heard about, and posting the times that you did so, those times being variously between 16:51 in the afternoon and 19:38. Is it right that, having received this quite distressing email from Maya, you did respond to her at 5:30, but then you also spent quite a bit of time posting on Urban 75?
That would appear to be the case, yes.
And did you do anything else in terms of responding to Maya at that time? Did you... There's no evidence at all that you went to her, that you called her, that you did anything else in response to her email?
Not that I can recall, no.
And is that because you simply didn't care enough about her?
I don't believe that's true, no.
What was so important that you had to spend the time on Urban 75 that evening rather than responding in a more significant way to Maya's email?
I clearly can't account for that.
You said that you didn't raise the issue. Your evidence is that you were struggling to cope with the relationship yourself, but you didn't raise it with SDS management.
No, you asked me that previously. That's indeed correct.
And you didn't raise it with the psychiatrist.
No, I don't believe I did.
Okay. And is the reason for that you knew that this relationship was prohibited by SDS management, and so you didn't want to bring it to their attention?
No, I think it was part of the general sense I had, internalisation, that what one did is that one dealt with these issues as an SDS officer. You didn't bring it to the attention of the SDS management.
You felt that you had to deal with everything yourself?
Yes.
Is it also the case that you put your career before Maya's health and well-being?
I couldn't comment on that.
You didn't consider giving up your post as an undercover officer?
Not at the time, no.
You've said that it was a two-way relationship, you were both hurting. In terms of Maya's particular complaints about the state of the relationship and your treatment of her that she set out in the emails, we can see that there's a number of different issues that arise in relation to her. But what is it that you say she did that caused you pain in that relationship?
Well, I'm going to say here that I'm not in any way, and I believe that it's quite possible that Maya may be listening to this, so I'm not going to take this as an opportunity to in any way denigrate Maya in any way. I just simply will not do that.
Are you saying that her behaviour in some way did cause you an awful lot of pain, but you're not willing to tell the inquiry about it?
No, I'm saying that the impact of that relationship, it did have an impact. I'm not certain that we are at the point yet where the actual effect of the relationship we will discuss.
Is it fair to say at this stage of the relationship, Maya seems to be coming off far worse than you were?
What I would say is there's clearly a record of the fact, and I don't dispute it, that Maya was clearly experiencing difficulties.
And there's no record at all or evidence of you really suffering at all from the relationship. Is it the truth that this was all one way in terms of the hurt?
No, and we can
harm?
explore this later on.
Can I turn to page 32 of Maya's exhibit, which is UCPI 38191? Page 32. We can see that she has sent you an email on Friday, the 12th of January 2007. I'm not going to go to that email in particular, but you have sent her, she's responding to you. We don't have the date that you sent the email, but we can see at the bottom of the page there's an email from you, and it would have been sometime before Friday, the 12th of January.
So the email here is a response from Maya to the email at the bottom, yes?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we understand from the chain of emails. So over onto the next page, page 33, we can see that this carries on. So this is an email from you to Maya that she's responding to on the 12th of January.
Yeah.
Paragraph 2 of this page, I think the key word is guilt. And you say, not for anything that I have done. My withdrawal from you, us, has developed out of a continuing sense of guilt over how our relationship seems to have had an effect on you, and one that isn't entirely positive. So this is you recognising that, in fact, the relationship is having a negative impact on Maya. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And the longer that the relationship goes on, the more painful it becomes. Is this because you had withdrawn over the Christmas period?
I think looking at this, this email is likely placed within withdrawing from the relationship.
Okay. So this is sometime at the beginning of January 2007.
Well, we have the date of the email, so that gives us some sense of when this took place.
Halfway down that paragraph, you say, increasingly I felt that you considered those visits to be little more than fuck trips. I hate that term, and that certainly wasn't the case. And at paragraph 5, you say, and so I feel guilty because of my inability to understand and help the one person who needs a cuddle more than anything else in the world. So this inability leads to my feeling guilty. Guilty at not being able to cope and understand more, and guilty for being selfish in wanting to sort through all the emotional baggage that I have before taking on anyone else's. And sometimes I just want to run away. So you recognise that she needs a cuddle, but you had withdrawn and were withdrawing from her rather than providing that for her. Were you just protecting your position and protecting your position as the UCO?
No.
You hadn't been present to provide her with a cuddle. Is that fair to say?
That appears to be suggested here, yes.
And you recognise the perception that she has started to develop, that the trips that you took to her home for sex were little more than fuck trips.
Well, yes, and I also challenged that as well, as you can see.
This appears to be a break-up email. You said that you were withdrawing from her, but you did continue to stay in touch with her. Looking back in hindsight now, was that a cruel thing to do, to carry on and perpetuate this relationship?
Between which period?
Between now, beginning of January, and when you actually did disappear from her life at this point at Easter time in 2007.
Yes.
Can we have a look at an email at page 43, please? So we're into March now, March the 5th, 2007. Paragraph 1. She's questioning, what do you want me to believe about you? I know you're hurting very much, but it doesn't matter. But does it matter to you that I am hurting too? Or do you have to keep sending snide, hurtful suggestions and comments about my fidelity just to make yourself feel better, to cover up the guilt for not actually dealing with me and with yourself? Were you even at this stage in March 2007 continuing to accuse her of infidelity?
Not that I recall.
Would that be inferred from this email, though? Do you accept that that was probably right?
No,
if you don't recall it.
No, I don't recall. But I can recognise there that clearly, as was the case at the time, I clearly did feel very guilty about the relationship and how it had gone.
At the bottom of paragraph 2, you say, she says to you, I couldn't function for a few days when you saw me bloody show photos to a friend. You can spy on my house all you like and interrogate anyone who knows me, and you will know I don't bring men into my room. Is it right that you had spied on her through her window in her own home?
No.
Had you seen her showing photos to a male friend in her home and commented on that?
I don't know what that refers to.
This is reference to a text message that she has written about in her her witness statement, to say that you texted her, you never show your photo albums to me. Do you recall doing that?
No.
You outside the window, looking through the window, and somehow...
Is that what she says, that I was outside the window? Because from what I hear, it says you can spy on my house. So let's unpack that. What's actually meant there?
So she understands from that she received... Well, she says that she received a text message from you to say you never show your photo albums to me. And the only way you must have known about that is if you had seen that happen through her window.
Well, I can't comment to that.
Did you watch through her window?
I don't recall doing so, no.
Looking back at some of the evidence that we've heard already, we've heard that you have appeared outside her house and said, look out the window, I'm here. We've heard evidence about you saying, well, Gabriel's watching over you. Did you stand outside of her house and watch her in her own home?
I don't recall doing so, no.
When you say you don't recall doing so...
Yes, because you're asking me, you want absolute certainty, a yes or no answer, and I'm suggesting to you that in 2026, I cannot recall whether I did this thing that you are suggesting may have happened.
That being a reasonably unusual thing to happen, it's likely, isn't it, that it'd be something that would stick in your mind?
All I can suggest to you is I do not remember doing this thing that you are suggesting.
Okay. Can you help us with whether it's the sort of thing you might have done?
No, it's not the sort of thing that I would do.
In that way, are you suggesting that Maya is making this up?
I have no idea as to whether this is true or not.
At page 44, paragraph 3, she says this, you know I can take a lot of pain. I've taken a hell of a lot, or a heck of a lot, as well as physical energy just taking in your assumptions about me and all the little questions and ways you like to evoke memories in me, like how many people I have fucked, or no, your question of if I even sucked my rapist's cock. Do you understand how it physically torments me to relive experiences through memories? Did you ask her that question, whether she sucked her rapist's cock?
I do not recall saying such a ridiculous thing.
Do you accept that you may have done because she's clearly put this into an email to you?
I do not recall saying such a ridiculous and hurtful thing.
What did you think about that when you read it in the email?
I have to ask you the question, is there a response to this provided by me in an email?
There isn't, not to this particular email. We have a whole chain of emails to you right up until the 3rd of April. Sorry, beyond that, the 20th of April, but no response. Had you, by this stage, completely checked out of this relationship?
I would expect that what had happened was that the relationship had come to an end.
Well, she says it doesn't come to an end until Easter 2007. This is still in March, 5th of March 2007.
But you haven't got any emails after that period in which there's an interaction, or is it all one way?
It appears all one way, but these are emails.
Okay, so there'll be text messages then that we can discuss.
Well, I don't know if there are any text messages, but was there a contact? Hang on. Do you not recall what happened around this time?
No. That's why I'm asking if you've got emails or text messages, because then we can discuss them and put them into context.
The emails that we have, there's probably some kind of evidence in the emails as to whether there is further contact between you. Yes, I think there is, because we get to the point where there's a pregnancy scare, which would suggest that you've had
As I've already indicated to you, there wouldn't have been a pregnancy scare because that would not have been possible.
So I want to ask you some questions about that, but just in relation to this email of the 5th of March, what did you think about that email where she's suggesting that you'd asked her quite an outrageous and upsetting question?
Yeah, I absolutely concede. You read that and that is horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. But do I recall saying that? No.
What about reading?
I read it now.
That you had
reading it now, that is horrendous. But have I responded to it? So I've got no contemporaneous record, which is the question I asked you. Do you have a contemporaneous record that gives you an indication as to how I may or may not respond to this thing that Maya is indicating that I have said to her?
So do you not recall her saying this to you in an email? Is that not something that sticks in your mind as something as quite striking?
It may have done, but there is no response. There is no record of a response outside of email or text message.
And you don't have any independent recollection other than what's set out here in the exhibits?
And that's an absolutely horrendous thing to say. I look at that and I think anyone would look at that and be horrified.
That, being horrified, that hasn't stuck in your mind since you read this?
No, clearly not.
How is that such a thing that's seemingly something that you've forgotten? Can you explain how you've just forgotten about that allegation?
I can't explain that. Perhaps I didn't say it. Maybe Maya's saying I said that.
But being accused of that, would you not remember that? Is that not something that you would remember if you had been accused of saying that?
But I clearly didn't. So was that because it wasn't true? I didn't say that and I just ignored it? I don't know.
The paragraph underneath that, she says, dealing with your guilt at the ways you have betrayed gives you no right to call me a traitor. I haven't betrayed you, and I certainly won't. Do you recall calling her a traitor?
Sorry, I'm just reading this.
Sorry, yeah.
No, I don't recall calling her that at all.
What would be the reason of her putting something like this into an email to you, not to anybody else, but directly just to you, if that hadn't actually have happened?
I have no idea.
And therefore, although you don't recall it, do you think that maybe it did happen and you just have forgotten?
I can't say. I can say I don't recall ever calling her that.
She says in her witness statement, paragraph 4.21, sometimes she received a text, "Oh, who are you going to fuck next?" Do you recall sending her text messages like that?
No. But then undoubtedly, if they were sent, then you have them, yes?
No, we don't have text messages.
Okay.
We have what she's exhibited are emails, and that's what she's been able to retain. But text messages, no.
Okay.
So you're saying because it doesn't exist, it didn't happen?
No, I'm saying, do you have it? Then I can comment on it.
No.
I don't
I'm
recall
asking you
sending
to-
text of that kind or that nature to her.
So your memory of that is that you have no recollection whether you did or didn't.
Yes.
Do you think it might be the sort of thing that you did send? Who are you going to fuck next?
I don't think so.
Maya says that if she didn't respond quickly enough, you would question where she had been, implying that she was with another man. And she says often you wouldn't respond to her replies until the middle of the night, which would make her feel increasingly on edge, finding it difficult to sleep, worrying she might miss a text in the night, and then be further accused of being unfaithful. Do you recall behaving in that way?
No.
Through text messages?
No.
Did you used to text her in the middle of the night?
I don't recall doing so, no.
Would you want to know where she was?
No, that's entirely her business.
Any behaviour like that would obviously have a serious impact on a young woman, wouldn't it?
I've got no doubt that some of the material that we've been discussing, of course, would have an impact.
And this drip effect of allegations of being unfaithful, infidelity, that would have an effect on Maya, wouldn't it?
You're saying allegations that I've made, and we've questioned that during the course of this as to whether that was the case or not.
Are you saying that Maya's emails just to you are not accurate at all?
What I've said to you previously is that you have a very poisonous relationship that exists between two people that is clearly destructive for both individuals involved.
In terms of the poison that's injected into this relationship, though, isn't that coming from you? There's no suggestion in the emails, at least, that we have, that there's anything that Maya's doing that is poisonous to the relationship.
So you have a limited amount of material available to you. You do not have anything that was taking place outside of that.
So are you able to help us with that?
No.
You have no recollection of what it was that was poisonous on her part?
I think that the key thing for us was that I was trying to deal with an individual who clearly was experiencing some great difficulties, and as has already been articulated by me previously in this, I am clearly struggling to understand what it is I can and cannot do to try and help this person, but at the same time know that I'm not in control of this person and that they have agency and they have choice and they have autonomy.
Do you recall her trying to find you, coming and visiting your flat when you were living in Bow?
I do recall that there were a number of occasions when I think Maya was going to come over and try to see me.
And she left you flowers on an occasion?
I don't recall flowers being left, but I certainly recall that she did try to come over to see me.
Okay, that's referenced in one of the emails where she says, I've left you some flowers. Do you accept that if it's in an email, it probably did happen?
Then it's likely true, yes.
She left you those flowers and a long letter saying she had not cheated on you. Do you accept that she probably wouldn't have done that if there hadn't been an allegation that she had cheated on you?
I don't know, I can't comment.
What about a gift of a book of poetry?
From me to her or her to me?
From her to you.
What more can you tell me about that?
A book containing poetry was given to you
I don't recall that, no.
as a gift.
I can't recall that, no.
A gift. What about a gift, an expensive turntable that could digitalise music as a show of affection and loyalty? She gave that to you.
Yeah, she did, yes.
Okay. And that gift, because it was expensive, was a significant one given Maya's limited means. She didn't have much money, did she?
As far as I'm aware, no.
And did you understand that that was a show of affection and loyalty in particular?
As far as I can recall, I was very shocked by the fact that she had done this thing, or had presented this thing to me.
Did you think that it was appropriate to accept the gift?
I don't know if she presented it to me in person, whether it was left with me. Did she say?
No, it doesn't say whether. Left where?
At outside the flat in Bow.
Would she leave an expensive gift like that outside?
I can't recall being handed this thing. I acknowledge that I was given this gift.
Yeah, you don't remember
But I
how.
can't recall how I received it.
Okay. Is it likely that she handed it to you in person?
If it's expensive, I would imagine it's the sort of thing that you would do so.
And did you consider whether you should accept it or not?
At the time, no.
Moving to the pregnancy scare at the end of March 2007, she sent a long email to you about her concerns and anxieties, and that starts page 48, please, of the exhibit. And she says, before you decide to snap again at me, take a deep breath and realise this is a letter. So this is a suggestion here that you'd had verbal communication, at least, whether that was by phone or face-to-face.
Possibly, yes.
So it's not that you had withdrawn completely from the relationship by early March 2005, is it?
I think there's obviously some kind of withdrawal taking place.
A prolonged withdrawal.
I don't know how prolonged, what the period of time was. But it certainly didn't happen instantly.
Fair to say from about January through to Easter of 2007.
I think 2007, early 2007 through.
And she says, so you think it's as simple as knowing whether I am pregnant or not? Fine, but you know yourself that all this waiting is extremely stressful. And so you can understand when I go out of my mind stressing, when I too have a million other issues over myself from the welfare of family members and certain friends, etc. She's telling you in this email about her concerns of being pregnant. And she's telling you because you were the person that she slept with.
Yeah.
Is that fair enough? Do you recall this incident?
Not until I've read this, yes. But sorry, what I mean by that is I haven't recorded, but now I'm reading this clearly now, yes.
This is triggering memories of this time.
Possibly, yes.
It's a particularly long email. You've had this exhibit. I don't know if you've had a chance to read through it, have you?
I think I was presented with quite a cache of a number of emails quite recently.
In terms of her upset about being pregnant, it appears that you didn't respond to that long email. Can you tell us why?
No.
Rather than emailing her, did you send her angry text messages in relation to that?
I have to ask you the same question. Do you have text messages that relate
Don't
to
have
this?
text messages. We don't have emails.
Okay.
Do you recall that, though?
I don't recall doing so, no.
Okay. So where she said snapping angrily, there were angry text messages as well, according to her recollection. Do you accept that there may well have been?
That's her recollection. It may not be mine.
Were you angry about the pregnancy scare?
No, I wouldn't have been.
She's obviously going through some turmoil in relation to the pregnancy.
No, she's going through turmoil, but she would not have been pregnant.
I appreciate that. In terms of the potential pregnancy, as she understood it, she was concerned that she may be pregnant. Is that fair?
Yes.
And she thought that was as a result of her having sex with you. What was the reason for you keeping secret the fact that you had a vasectomy?
Because I think within our relationship, such as it was, and by this time it's at the end, I wouldn't have felt that it was appropriate to share that with her. There may have been discussions. We clearly hadn't reached a stage where I would have felt comfortable to let her know that was the case.
So you're letting her go through this traumatic experience. She's going to the GP. She's obviously struggling with it. And you didn't say to her, don't worry, there's no chance of you being pregnant from me.
No.
That was cruel, wasn't it?
I think she's going through an experience of some kind, but we can see that I know she's clearly not pregnant.
So you're quite satisfied, nothing to worry about. You're clear that you can carry on this relationship with
the relationship, as we can see, the relationship at this point, such as it is, appears to be, if not already, has come to an end, or is certainly coming to an end.
If I put it this way, then, you have engaged in a relationship with Maya, knowing throughout that there could be no consequences of children as a result of your relationship.
Yeah.
So you're quite satisfied that's not going to be what would otherwise be a quite serious consequence of a sexual relationship.
Yeah.
And so does that give you a sense of security that you're not going to have to ultimately tell anybody else about this? You're not going to have to disclose this to your managers?
No.
Does it not give you a sense of security at all?
Insofar only that she's clearly not pregnant, there is clearly going to be not knowledge on my part that this clearly isn't true.
You were quite satisfied that you could engage sexually with Maya without a pregnancy risk. Did you think about telling that to her so she didn't have to use any other form of contraception?
No. Why
not?
I don't recall us ever really having a discussion about contraception.
Is that a particularly selfish thing for you to do in the course of what would otherwise seem like quite a serious relationship?
I think if you look back at this, then clearly, yes, it could be viewed in that way.
In Easter 2007, you suddenly ended the relationship according to Maya's recollection. So you'd had contact up until this point. Easter in 2007 was end of March. And you said to her that your mother was dying of cancer, you had to travel to Durham. Is that right?
I may have said that, if that's her recollection.
And you said that to her by text or phone. You didn't say that face to face. Do you recall that?
I don't recall that, no.
Is it fair to say that you knew she would be devastated by that news?
No, I didn't consider that. But it's worth mentioning that during this period of time in the real world, my mother was ill and did die of cancer.
She sent an email to you on the 20th of April 2007 expressing her devastation. Did you think about contacting her, speaking to her further about it?
About the...
About you leaving her, about why you were leaving her?
I don't think so.
Did you leave Maya because of the pregnancy scare?
No, because there wasn't a pregnancy scare.
Not in your mind, but in her mind there was.
There was no possibility of her being pregnant.
Did you? What was the purpose of you leaving her? Why did you leave her?
I think the relationship it was fairly clear that it was very destructive at that time. You had two individuals who, someone perhaps, I don't know, should have stepped in and said, you two are clearly not right for each other, you need to separate.
Did her friends try doing that and you told her to ignore them?
I don't recall doing so.
Is that likely?
I don't recall doing so.
Do you recall recognising that some of her friends thought you were a prick?
That
Sorry,
may have-
and I'm saying that because
well,
it
no,
was
'cause there's
one of
in
the...
an email, right?
You saw it in the email.
Yeah, where the email it says, well, I don't care if you're friends. Well, that suggests to me that they may have been communicated to me by Maya, but I certainly don't remember anyone... can't recall being called that by anyone, any of Maya's friends.
Okay. Was that a sense that you got, though, from... Was a particular friend or some of her friends, a collective?
No.
Were you focused at this time on the G8 in Germany and the Gatwick camp, which we'll come on to later?
In terms of work, I think that would have possibly been in that period of preparation.
Okay. So we're going into the summer months as in the SDS. You're still operating as a UCO. You haven't withdrawn from your deployment, have you?
I don't think so, no.
Were you involved in any other sexual relationships at that time?
No.
Was this a part of a planned withdrawal strategy?
No.
It was just simply you personally deciding that you were going to finish the relationship with Maya?
It was our relationship coming to an end by way of what had obviously gone on in the poisonous nature of the relationship, how it had become.
And that was a unilateral decision by you? It wasn't a mutual breakup, was it?
No, that I certainly had taken that decision. For the best, you can see from the material that we've discussed that clearly Maya was in what appears to be a great deal of distress, and the best possible thing I could do would be to remove myself from that.
She sent you a further email, as I've referred to already, on the 20th of April 2007. It's at page 53 of the exhibit. And it's the next page that I'm interested in. So right down at the bottom, I get thoughts such as you, and over on the top of the next page, must have used me for a fuck ride, and now you're bored. I mean, look at the facts. After you hurt me by accusing me of cheating on you, and I sent you lots of messages about that and letters, then you text me in the middle of the night on Friday that you wanted to come in my arse. Do you remember sending that text message?
No. Do you have that text message?
We don't have text messages.
Okay.
We have emails.
Okay.
Is there any reason that she would send this message to you other than the fact that that actually did happen?
I can't say, but that's clearly awful.
And what did you think when you read this email?
I'm reading it now. Well, reading it at the time, if I haven't responded, then I clearly haven't responded.
Actually, I think we do have this email, don't we? Further down, the last paragraph, Saturday, when you yelled at me asking if I thought it was funny to call you from different numbers, and I was in a phone box, well, my phone was nearly dead or low, on low battery. Your tone of resentment broke me down to cry so badly I fell there, a BT phone box somewhere in the middle of Euston Road, unable to move, and have 6 people over the course of time asking me if I was okay. Do you recall her phoning you from a phone box?
No.
She's desperate at the end of a relationship, thinking that you have walked out on her, you're not responding to her, you're not answering her calls. And she's telling you about what happened when she was by a phone box trying to call you from a different number. Do you remember telling her to fuck off, just fuck off, before hanging up on her?
No.
Do you remember telling her that, did she think it was funny calling from a different number?
No.
fact that she set all this out to you in an email shows that this is something that's quite clear in her recollection. She's got a very clear memory of it, and she's got the contemporaneous document here that she sent to you. Is it more likely that this is true compared with your hazy memory that you can't remember sending these messages?
If this is true, then this is awful. I make no excuses for this.
So, and if it's true, will you say if it's true?
Well, I wasn't there, so I can't verify whether this happened or not.
Are you saying you didn't receive a phone call?
You've asked me if I recalled receiving the phone call, and I said to you no.
So you have your evidence is it didn't happen, or your evidence is you don't remember whether it happened or not.
Well, I don't recall this happening.
Okay.
But I make the point to be clear. If this is true, this is horrendous and it's awful.
The suggestion that you sent her a text saying that you wanted to come in her arse, is that the sort of thing that you would text to her?
I can't comment on that.
Did you send her explicit sexual messages like that?
Certainly during the course of our relationship, there were explicit messages exchanged, yes.
Okay. And was it that sort of thing?
They were broadly what most people regard as being quite vulgar and coarse.
So it's not completely off the scale. You would never write that. This is not something that you would have done. It's just you don't recall
I don't
having
recall
done
sending
it.
that.
She says, and quite vividly recalls, that it was quite out of the blue when she received that text, not in keeping with the context of other communication at the time, and such a sexually explicit message caused her to feel shocked, insulted, and demeaned. And in hindsight, she considers it to be highly sexually predatory behaviour. Do you accept that characterisation of your behaviour in the context of you having withdrawn from the relationship?
As you've asked me, do I recall sending that message? I can't recall sending that message.
You continued to contact her intermittently after you said you left in Easter 2007. Do you recall sending her a text in the summer of 2007 to read Dead Man in Deptford about Christopher Marlowe?
That sounds possible.
Is that a book that you were reading at the time?
It is a book that I'm familiar with, yes.
That cast him as a spy for the Crown?
Yes.
And were you expecting her to pick up on that?
When was this email sent? Or text message?
Summer 2007.
Do you have that?
We don't have text messages.
Okay.
Were you wanting her to decipher some code about that?
I can't say.
What did you send that to her for?
Probably because it's a fantastic book. If you haven't read it, I very much recommend it.
So it's just a book recommendation as opposed to a reference to you being an undercover spy?
I wouldn't recall it as being intended to be in any way deciphered as such.
Was there any sense that you were finding it funny or a game playing with Maya in this way post leaving her?
Absolutely not, no.
By summer 2007, Maya says that she'd started to use heroin and crack cocaine to cope with your departure. Are you aware of that?
I wasn't, well, I believe there may have been references on a blog to things that potentially could be references to this activity. To be clear, I never saw Maya undertaking any such activity. I never saw any drug paraphernalia of any kind during the course of our relationship.
Did you go to pick her up from a friend's house in Woolwich around summer 2007?
I don't recall doing so.
She recalls that you drove to pick her up and take her home, and she'd been using heroin at that house. And that was the second or third time you'd met since you claimed to have moved out to Durham. So although you moved to Durham in Easter...
No, I didn't move to Durham. I was still in East London.
Did you tell her you'd moved to Durham to be with your mother?
I think I'd said I'd gone up to there because it was part of my legend.
And how long did you tell Maya that you were going to be up in Durham?
I don't recall giving a specific time.
So it appears from her evidence that she understood you'd claimed to move to Durham to be with your mother, but then you'd met up on a 2 or 3 occasions post that, and on this occasion she said that you picked her up from the house. Do you remember that?
I don't recall that, no.
She said that you took her home, and she told you in the car that she'd smoked heroin using silver foil. Do you remember that?
No.
And you said you'd always be watching over her somehow. Again, is it this sense of like an angel watching over her?
No, I don't recall saying that at all. I don't recall, as I've said to you, I don't recall actually picking her up.
So, in terms of giving her a sense that you would always be watching her, looking over her in some way, did you give her a sense, whether that was when you during this car journey or whether it was on another occasion when you met up?
I certainly felt very protected towards her, as I've previously described, given some of the experiences that she was describing by way of email.
And so did you give her to have the impression that she would be watched by you?
No.
Would you say something like that so that she would always be thinking of you, that you were around somewhere?
No.
That suggestion she recalls now, in hindsight, as being quite creepy. Do you accept that? If you had said that, would that be quite a creepy thing to say?
I don't know how she... If I had said that, which I don't recall, I'm not certain how I would have interpreted it.
But you used the sense of, you being Gabriel, you being an angel.
I don't deny that I felt very protective towards Maya, even when the relationship was finished.
And did you give her the sense that you would be watching over her as an angel? You can't remember saying things like that.
No, I don't recall saying anything like that at all.
That brings to an end your relationship with Maya during the course of your deployment. I want to ask you questions about post-deployment contact with Maya, but that will probably be tomorrow.
Okay.
Now. In terms of your relationship with Maya at this stage, during the course of your deployment, do you accept that your treatment of Maya amounted to domestic abuse?
I accept that I was involved in a relationship with someone that was unwise to engage with, was wrong, morally and ethically wrong, and I should not have done so.
And what about your treatment of Maya during the course of that relationship?
I think it's fairly clear that it was a relationship of 2 people who should not have been together and should not have engaged with each other in any way whatsoever.
What about specifically your treatment of her? Do you think that amounted to domestic abuse?
No, but I would say that it was certainly clearly the relationship, the way that we treated each other was cruel and destructive.
And in terms of the way that she treated you, how do you say that was cruel and destructive?
Well, I think there was certainly an impact from my relationship with Maya. I certainly felt guilty about the relationship, and that guilt continued to go on and have some pretty powerful effects subsequently.
Are you saying she caused you to feel guilt?
I'm saying that I felt guilt as a result of that relationship having taken place.
And you saying that's Maya's fault?
No, I'm not attributing blame. I've simply said that you had a relationship of 2 people who perhaps should not have been together. And both individuals obviously caused harm to each other in different ways.
Thank you. Sorry, just bear with me one moment. Just 2 points on the pregnancy issue, if I may, before we move on. In your witness statement, you do say at paragraph 192.2 that you assumed Maya was taking precautions. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And why would she need to be taking precautions?
I just assumed that she would be doing so. I was never asked by her to use any form of contraception. The assumption there in that is that therefore this is something that she perhaps as part of her would have taken, is something that she's taken care of as not responsibility for, but that's something that she's attended to.
And you didn't feel any obligation to, or responsibility towards her to make sure that she did feel comfortable and she did feel secure in her own sexual reproductive life in that way?
No.
Atif Chowdhury says in evidence that you spoke with him about the possibility that Maya might be pregnant and that you had cried on him about that, or you had cried in front of him about that. Do you recall that occurring?
No.
Would that have been, again, are you saying that that didn't happen, that Atif is wrong about that, or that you just don't recall that happening?
I'm saying to the absolute best of my recollection, I do not recall ever having done that in front of him or spoken about this to him.
If you had, would that have been part of some kind of carrying on the deployment, the performance of what was going on in your life with Maya?
Well, as I say, I don't recall doing that, so your question, therefore, is potentially.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Those are all the questions I have in relation to Maya, and so I'd like to continue now with your reporting.
Before we move on to that,
yes.
may I ask a question arising out of those that you've asked?
Yes, of course.
And answers given. You said about your relationship with Maya, and I've got your words down word for word. Both individuals caused harm to each other in different ways. You've acknowledged the ways in which you caused harm to her. In what way did she cause harm to you?
I think the question I would have is in relation to the guilt that developed in relation to the relationship, in terms of, and also the fact that I was unable to help her, given the things that she described to me in the emails. I clearly didn't step in and help her in the way that perhaps I should have done. And I think I've always felt and continue to feel a great sense of guilt around that and the relationship itself. The harm comes from the fact that mentally that started to have a real impact on me.
I'm far from sure I understand you. The thrust of what you're saying is that it was your own actions which caused you harm to yourself.
No, what you have there, forgive me with respect, the fact is that you've got a relationship with two people. It's not a single person. You've got two people involved in a relationship. Quite a toxic relationship, as you can see. There are harms on both sides. I don't see it as a one-way street.
Forgive me, I'm still at a loss to understand how it is that you can say of her that she caused you harm.
By way of the fact that there is guilt because I could not understand how best to cope with her reaction to what was going on to her. And that sense of guilt was damaging to me. And that guilt arose out of the interaction that had taken place between Maya and I.
It is your sense of guilt which caused damage to you.
I think that the guilt for me would go on to play an important part in future events.
That I can understand. What I simply don't understand is how any of this can be laid in the sense of blame at the door of Maya.
Forgive me then, the fault is on my side that I'm obviously not able to explain this to your satisfaction.
No, I readily understand that the sense of guilt that you felt from these events, and we're going to come on to this later, had an impact upon your relationship with your ex-partner and your children, your family.
Yeah.
That I readily understand. All I don't understand, and we've covered this now, I think, enough for me to understand the thrust of your answer, but all I don't understand is how you can possibly say that this is in any way Maya's fault? Are you saying it is in any way her fault?
I've given my explanation, so I'm sorry if I'm sorry I'm not able to explain it to the depth of detail or to your satisfaction. And I don't say that in any way to be rude.
No. I leave matters there, but you will appreciate that the answers that you've given to me, I have difficulty in accepting as they stand.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Can we have up on screen, please, MPS 0069142. It's behind tab C70, bundle 4. And this is a report from the 19th of July 2006 in relation to a candlelit vigil and protest in Parliament Square against the Israeli bombardment of Lebanon. A small number of London ISM activists attempted to sit down in protest in the road. Were you at this event? Do you recall it?
I believe so.
Can we go down to the source comment, please? So this is a source comment. So this is coming from you. A number of years ago, it was secretly reported that MT was considering wearing a mock explosive body belt during a demonstration against the visit to London by the Israeli Prime Minister. Do you recall where you got that information from and
No.
why? Is it likely you got this from HN 118 Simon Wellings?
I don't recall.
Do you recall if you got it from another UCO?
I don't recall. However, I would say that would be most unlikely that I would utilise another UCO's information as part of my own reporting.
We understand this to be reporting emanated from HN 118 Simon Wellings' deployment. And we're just trying to understand how it's ended up in one of your reports.
Well, it could be. I'm just trying to think because I remember that Simon Welling was certainly involved in an incident where someone he'd reported on the fact that someone had mocked up to undertake action in such a way as to cause disruption. So it may have been that he had mentioned that person, and so therefore that may have gone into this report.
Why did you feel the need to put in something in relation to this that had happened years ago?
Well, that's a comment. So it may very well have been that this is someone that's previously been looked at, been reported on, so therefore you may be interested in this.
Is it because it was something to do with an explosive body belt and anything to do with suicide bombing? You thought that's at least something that I can put in my reports to try and justify my deployment?
No, I did not. I didn't have to justify my deployment.
Can we have up, please, MPS 0069446, behind tab B72, which is in bundle 3, sir. This is a report of a meeting of activists at LSE in London on the 1st of August 2006 to discuss potential anti-war actions. And we can see here that the people involved were individuals, including people from the ISM London and No Borders London. About 70 people presented from a number of different groups, 70 to 80 members from disparate groups. And the meeting was known as Lebanese Assembly, which later became...
State of emergency.
State of emergency.
Or rather, state of emergency, the group emerged out of this meeting.
Okay. This is a type of reporting from you that's the raw reporting that is then made up into the individual sanitised reports. Is that fair?
It would appear to be so.
we understand from the sanitised reports that we have that it's this one raw report is made up into then 4 separate sanitised reports. I'm not going to go to those. I'm just relying upon this one report that you make in relation to the LSE meeting. And there's a number of different potential demos or protests that were being considered to raise, to protest against the war. You say in your report, about 10 to 15 people call for some form of direct action. And if we can look at paragraph 4 on this page, we can see that one of the actions is in relation to RAF Bryce Norton. Do you recall that?
I don't recall the specifics of that, but clearly it's been included in this reporting.
And effectively people would try and attend at Bryce Norton and demonstrate there, because that's one of the RAF bases from where planes were flying. Is that
Potentially
right?
that would have been why they had an interest in that.
And we can also see that another potential protest under consideration was in relation to the US Embassy in Grosvenor Square. And it might involve people breaking through the low-level fence into the embassy area and into the building itself. These locations would have had security anyway, wouldn't they? They would have known that they would be a potential for different protests. Is that fair to say? And given that there had been protests at these places before, it's not an unusual thing to think that they would be alive to the fact that they would have to have security arrangements in place to deal with any protest or direct action. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Over on page 2 in paragraph 1, we can see that part of the plan at the embassy would be to throw eggs. Although one of the protesters, because she was vegan, considered that paint balloons might be a better option. So these aren't seriously criminal protests that they're contemplating.
Well, it seems to be that you've got a number of different discussions taking place about a number of different potential actions, and this seems to be there is a discussion taking place as to very much an embryonic discussion as to what form those protests may take.
Okay, and paragraph 2 on this page, we've got again consideration given to an action outside Downing Street on the 5th of August 2006 that might involve either eggs, paint, or dye in the street. What was dye in the street? What was a dye in?
So, to the best of my recollection, that would involve a group of protesters coming together, and then they would deliberately, obviously, then lie down in the street and then cause disruption to traffic because of the blockage they would then cause.
Okay, so is an inconvenience caused by blocking the roads?
That would be my understanding, yes.
And would that be obstruction of the highway sort of offending?
Public order disruption, yes. Okay. Breach of the peace, it would depend on how the police officers present chose to deal with it.
Okay. Generally speaking, low-level protest with a direct action element to it.
Well, the issue here is that you've got, this appears to be, from what I can see here, a discussion. And the issue here is that although you might have individuals, you can have different individuals arguing to undertake different things, and there is always the potential that something might start as something, but then there might, because of the nature of protesters being together, you might then get other actions, and some protesters might decide then to undertake actions that are not part of that general discussion.
So there might be a bit of a breakaway.
That could always be possible.
Person.
Yeah, that would very much be determined by, in often case, by the types of the specific individuals who were present as activists/protesters.
And was that something that you came across as part of your deployment?
I can certainly recall on at least one occasion there was a large demonstration in London, and a group of individuals, some of whom I think would later, if not before or after, I would identify as being members of state of emergency, during the course of a large-scale demonstration, had sought to hand out some type of message to get people to converge on the US Embassy, with the possible view of then undertaking some form of action directly against the embassy itself.
Along the lines of what was being contemplated here, or
As I say, from what I can recall, and this was reported by me into, at the time, live, as a live event, it was to get enough people together around that location, to get a critical mass, if you like, of individuals. And then the protesters would be able to agitate or aggravate in some way if that's what they wanted to do. And they would then have individuals around them, some of whom may, whether they'd intended to or not, might then be drawn into any kind of action that was then undertaken.
In terms of people being drawn into direct action, is it fair to say that the groups that you were infiltrating, ISM London, No Borders London, and ultimately State of Emergency, would not require people to be part of any direct action? That would be entirely somebody's own individual choice?
It could be a group choice, or it could also be a group choice. It could be a group choice, or an individual choice. Very often the decision as to whether an individual engaged in direct action was clearly a decision, if you like, or a choice made by the individual. Although you would clearly have other actions where individuals would agree to come together and they would then undertake an action and agree what steps they would take beforehand, who would agree to be arrested, what would happen in the event of an arrest, what they were seeking to do.
And was it your understanding that nobody would be forced to take part in a direct action if they didn't want to?
From the reporting that I provided, I can't recall anyone ever being forced to take part in a direct action.
Paragraph 4 on this page, please. We've got reference to Atif Chowdhury at the bottom. And it's reported that he suggested targeting the arms manufacturer Raphael, located in Duke Street. Not really clear on whether they are located on Duke Street, but you say that it was he that suggested that potential action. He denies that. He said he did not propose that as a target and did not attend any of the demos that were foreseen at this meeting. And if he did attend the meeting, it would have been as an observer. Could you have got this report wrong in relation to Atif?
I don't think so. My recollection is that it was Atif who invited me to this meeting to accompany him to the LSE event.
I don't think he disputes that he was there, but he disputes that he then suggested Raphael as a target for a demonstration. Is it fair to say that might have been inaccurate in this report?
No.
So you don't accept that you got this wrong?
What I would say is if I've reported at that time, then at the time of reporting, I obviously consider that to be true.
When you write your reports, do you write them there and then, or do you make the reports when you get home in the evening or at the weekend? Or do you type them up on a Monday when you're in the SDS safe house?
It could vary.
Is there a chance that between attending the meeting and then writing up the report, you've mistaken who it was that actually made that suggestion at the meeting?
Reading this report now, it seems fairly clear that the italics suggest that this was something that stood out. So, and also the tense is written in, I would suggest that no, that was reported as I understood it to be.
Page 3, please, paragraph 1. It's noted that there's wide publication of meeting information. The last sentence, this then led to the realisation that the action would have to be discussed with the wider gathering when it reconvened. And given the public and necessarily open nature of the meeting, the information would effectively become public knowledge at that time. So this was an open public meeting at the LSE for anybody that wanted to attend. Is that right?
Well, I attended on the invitation of Atif, so whoever chose to attend, I can't recall there being any barriers in terms of who could or could not attend.
What were you able to report from this meeting that any police source wouldn't be able to obtain from less intrusive means? That, and from that, I mean not having an undercover source
Well, I think-
infiltrating the group, but just attending a public activist
Well, I think
meeting.
there's a recognition in this reporting that there were breakout groups in the meeting. So that suggests to me that if you will need a UC within that environment to identify the correct or the right breakout groups with individuals to be part of, to look and discover whether there's any potential action intended. Very often in this situation, you'll have wider meetings where general topics will be discussed in the most general of ways, and after that, you would then potentially have breakout groups and individuals would then convene and then decide what form of action there would be. Whether that will be reported back to the general group will be open to discussion. As you can probably appreciate, for committed activists, that's not the thing they would want to see happen.
And at the time, were you aware of you being the only UC amongst that group of people?
I wouldn't have known. I mean, arguably, unless it was another SDS officer that I would have identified. But beyond that, there may very well have been other officers, but unless they've been identified to me, I wouldn't know.
And by other officers, you're talking about normal undercover plainclothes police officers attending a public meeting, not somebody that's infiltrated a group long term.
I don't know. Forgive me. You might have had. There may very well have been another officer reporting in there undercover. I don't know.
Okay, but outside of the SDS group, you mean?
Possibly, yes.
Yeah.
If there was another, let me state this clearly, forgive me. If there was another SDS officer in the room, then I would have known that.
On some of the sanitised reports, and one of the examples is MPS 0069426, behind tab C76. We can see that a source comment refers to privacy, surname unknown, is involved with bringing refugee children from Gaza to the UK for respite. And it appears further down that that person was then researched. What was the point of reporting on something like that?
Can you just reduce that box down, please, so I can see the...
Yeah.
That would have been included because I'm reporting on the targeting of the US Embassy, and you have this individual. Again, it's can they be identified by virtue of the extra information that's been provided to identify them.
So you're saying that the fact that somebody is bringing refugee children from Gaza to the UK for respite is a source of information that might lead to the identity of this particular person?
Potentially. If you notice, it's SNU, so that would suggest that they didn't know obviously they didn't know the surname of the individual.
Okay. If it helps, it's item 32 on the cipher list.
Item
32, please.
Right, okay.
So do you recognise that name?
The first name, yes.
It's the source. So in the box 32, the source comment reference, that person's name in red. Do you see it in the cipher list? Box 32. It's the person
Yes.
noted next to source comment.
Yes.
Did you know that person?
Given the nature of this reporting, I would suggest that I didn't know her well at this time.
Okay. Did you think it was of interest about refugee children being brought in from Gaza to the UK for respite? Is the Gaza link something that you thought was important that Special Branch should know about?
I think the interest here is that you've got an individual who has some form of link to Gaza, and they are attending a meeting whereby they are discussing the possibility of targeting the US Embassy.
Asa Winstanley, in his exhibit, UCPI 38560, Page 57, please. Exhibits an email now this appears to be through the Red Room chat. Can you explain what the Red Room is? This a forum for ISM members to communicate?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure. I know that this has come up previously during the course of our discussions, but I can't recall what it was specifically.
It looks like you do engage with this Red Room. I think it's a forum or an emailing list where you're using your rspharrison@yahoo.co.uk emailing address. And it's about Balata Kids' request. And this is from the 22nd of August 2005, so sometime before this report, about a year before. So were the Balata Kids a reference to refugee children coming to the UK for respite?
Possibly.
And had you known about that charity or mission, if you like, being something that was facilitated for some time?
I can't recall.
There's a request that had been sent that the Balata Kids will be staying at such and such on Tuesday night before leaving on Wednesday. We need to provide them with bedding. Can you help provide a sleeping bag, duvet, camping mat, and if yes, bring to blank St George's on the night? And you reply, I've got a sleeping bag or mat that I will bring over on Tuesday if that's okay. Did you take the sleeping bag?
I can't recall.
Do you recall meeting the children that had been brought over from Gaza?
No, I don't.
And they're being brought over from the refugee camps, is that right?
I don't recall.
Yeah, I've just had confirmation the Red Room is an emailing list.
Okay.
Is that?
So is that an open access email list or is it closed?
My understanding is the Red Room was an invite only from ISM members, but we will check that because I'm not completely sure about that. You don't recall anything about that?
I don't remember. No, I'm sorry.
Did you engage with this project to bring children over for respite on any other occasion?
Not that I can recall.
And so your evidence is you didn't have anything to do with those children who were part of that initiative?
I don't recall, no.
Can we have on screen, please, 0069652, please? This is behind tab C90. And it's a report of the 23rd of August 2006. Again, we're still looking at Lebanese Assembly. They haven't become state of emergency just yet. And on page 2, please, paragraph 4, we can see that you report that the group are keen to organise an action at RAF Bryce Norton on Saturday, the 9th of September 2006. And so this follows on from that earlier meeting, that general meeting. It said that 2 people are to approach either Oxford Stop the War campaign or Swindon Stop the War campaign to assist with the organisation of this event. And there's a suggestion here that the state of emergency would come in behind the Stop the War campaign as kind of like this secret protest group, this direct action group, and hoodwink the local police. Do you see how that's been presented in the report?
I do, yes. I can certainly say that the individuals who made up state of emergency certainly saw themselves as being committed activists rather than just generalists, if you like. And clearly they were politically astute and politically involved. In terms of they took their politics far more seriously than most ordinary people do.
And did you consider this some kind of subterfuge that only a UCO could have obtained that was not otherwise discoverable by local police?
I can only speak in general terms, but as a tactic, that would be quite useful. And it wouldn't be unusual. We can speak about the meeting at the LSE earlier, and what was fairly clear during the course of that meeting is there were members of the left-wing group of another left-wing group had gathered together and were seeking to divert the general meeting in its own particular direction.
Did you believe that local police would be taken unawares, despite previous direct action being undertaken at Bryce Norton?
Well, from what I'm reporting here, that would appear to be the case.
Or is this reporting, in fact, an exaggerated reporting, making something out of not very much in terms of any threat or risk of serious crime or disorder?
This is something that's come up previously, and I say the same thing to you. At no stage did I exaggerate my reporting.
There's a note in, I'll bring it up, at MPS 0070350 behind tab B78. So this is one of the reviews of your authority, and I understand from your evidence you never saw these RIPA authorities or reviews or updates.
That would be my understanding, yes.
Page 2, please. In paragraphs 4 and 5, I'll give you a moment just to look at that.
Okay.
It's suggesting that the State of Emergency Collective was going to almost take the place of what was the Wombles. So a fairly a significant, well-known direct action group.
But I clearly didn't write this report, didn't have access to it, but that seems to be what the author of the report intends to be understood.
Based upon your reporting?
Likely, yes.
Okay. So we can see that intelligence gleaned by Commonweal has allowed the Counter-Terrorism Command SO15 to fully identify the main activists within this group, allowing CTC to accurately assess the capabilities of this group to cause disorder. And we can see, we'll have a look at some of your reporting, but in terms of the capabilities of that group to cause disorder, was that seen as something significant, a significant part of your reporting? Was the disorder that was going to be potentially caused by state of emergency?
Well, certainly any kind of public disorder would have been something that I would have considered during the course of my reporting, yes. And the action that activists would obviously undertake.
We can see from MPS 0076342 this is behind tab C208 in bundle 5. That the SOE collective have met and they set out a statement of purpose. Sorry, I've just... So it may be an appropriate time to actually take a break. I've been told that we need to break for the afternoon, and I will get my head into this report and find out exactly what I want to put to the witness.
So that everyone knows where we're going, I have referred to a private session, is that going to take place
It's not
today or
today,
tomorrow?
it's actually
That'll be tomorrow. Yeah, there we are. Would it be sensible to fix that for tomorrow morning when we start, so that we don't have people coming in and then having to leave and then coming back? Entirely in your hands, but
We can discuss that and
Yes.
think about the best way to manage that. I can
right.
think about that.
10 minutes? 10 minutes. Ms. Hemingway.
If we can have up on screen, please, MPS 0076342. So going back to this report that we were looking at just before the break, this is looking at a draft statement of purpose by the new State of Emergency Collective, and you note in paragraph 2 what that was agreed to read at the time. And we can see that it says state of emergency seeks to highlight and take direct action against the causes and effects of the war on terror. We stand in solidarity against military and economic oppression by defending ourselves against the ever-increasing domination of the state. And we recognise that the state in which we live will continue for as long as our obedience enables them to control us. And that was something that was going to then be emailed around. And we can see on the next page that the agreement of the statement may now allow the group to concentrate on identifying and undertaking specific actions. What was your understanding, looking at that source comment, about the capabilities of public disorder arising from direct action from members of state of emergency at that time?
It wouldn't have been known to me. That would have been in the future. So what you very much have here clearly is a nascent group with individuals with it yet to be determined what specific forms of action they would undertake.
And the fact that this group included individuals who had been involved in direct action before, did that make you consider that this was a potentially high-risk group?
No, what it would have meant is that these were individuals in this group. It was necessary that I would report on them because of that, the fact those individuals were involved.
Okay. And the type of activities that they were going to be involved in, we'd looked at already in that general public meeting that they'd had back in the LSE previously.
Sorry, could you repeat that, please?
So the Lebanese Assembly meeting that they'd had in the LSE.
It's no longer, so the Lebanese Assembly, as far as I can see, that's gone.
Yeah.
You now have state of emergency, the group of individuals who've come together out of that particular meeting and elsewhere.
Okay. And the types of actions that they would be looking to take part in would be the sorts that were discussed at that earlier meeting at the LSE.
Not necessarily.
Under the banner of Lebanese Assembly.
Not necessarily, no.
No.
There could always be a difference. You've got the public meeting, open to members of the public, and then you've got the cells that would come together, and then you've now got a group that's come together of people with experience in activism. Different thing altogether.
Did they term themselves cells, or is that something you've attributed to the different
That would be
groups?
how I would describe them.
Okay. And that seems to have connotations of like terrorist cells. Would you accept that or not?
I see it more as if you think of a complex moving, you've got individual units that would move around. So that would be how I'd think of it or conceptualise it.
Okay. We can see that one of the events that comes a little later. This is a report that was written by you about a year before, actually, is in relation to the Smash Edo mass march against complicity in the war in Iraq, Lebanon, Afghanistan. Can we go to MPS 0069716, please? It's behind tab C93 of Bundle 5. So we can see, the dates don't seem to add up. We were talking about a nascent campaign setting out their statement of purpose in 2007, yet in 2006 we've got state of emergency being involved in a Smash Edo mass march in Brighton?
State of emergency, I can say with absolute certainty, state of emergency did exist until after the meeting at the LSE. So I don't know why there's a discrepancy in the date.
Right, but that would be 2006. So this was a mass march, and we're looking at people who were part of the protest. Smash Ado are planning some direct action, details not known, and that was something that you became aware of during this mass march in Brighton. Is that right?
I've reported this, yes.
Okay. Can we go back to the report just to check the date? MPS 007 6342. So can you help us with why it appears that the statement of purpose of state of emergency is being drawn up a year after events that they had taken part in as part of a group, such as the Smash Ado march?
No, this clearly doesn't accord. There's an error here somewhere.
You understood this as being something that was done at the outset of them setting up the group, is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, well, we'll move on from that anyway. MPS 0069898, please. Sorry, that's something I can look at overnight and clarify if we need to tomorrow. So the next report, MPS 0069898, please. Behind tab C96. And this is a report, again, from 2006, September, about state of the emergency, holding a protest at the London Soldier Chelsea Barracks. You note that some people were not going to support the Stop the War demo in Manchester on Saturday the 23rd, but instead they were to hand out leaflets and unfurl a banner at the Army recruitment drive. No likely violence occurring there, I take it.
At that time of the reporting, I wouldn't be able to say whether there would have been violence, yes or no. This is reporting, giving notification of intention.
And this was people handing out leaflets to those attending a recruitment drive, asking them to reconsider their choices.
Potentially, yes. The members of state of emergency, as you can imagine, were not great fans of the British Army.
Can we have a look at page 2, please? And we can see that your comment was that protesters are likely to comply with any firm request to leave the venue, no pre-planned intention to be arrested. The last protest organised by State of Emergency attracted the support of 7 activists. With better organisation this time, activists hope to attract a few more participants. But this was not something that essentially was going to need public order policing. Is that fair to say?
No, but if I can recall correctly, the forward intelligence team or members of the forward intelligence team were present.
Okay, so that forward intelligence team were going to be present. Is that because you submitted this report, or is that because police anticipated that people would be protesting such a drive anyway?
I wouldn't be able to comment on that.
MPS 007 0070, please. It's behind tab C100 of Bundle 5, and this is efforts to publicise the blockade of Parliament event. And this was in the shadow of the SOCPA legislation coming into force, is that right? The Serious Organised Crime and Police Act 2005.
I don't believe so. Or does it say this in the report?
Um,
It's just that when you mention that SOCPA, I don't imagine SOCPA would have been a specific an area of interest for members of state of the emergency.
that was legislation that was brought in around this time, and it prevented people from demonstrating and protesting in Parliament Square. Is that right?
In which case, forgive me, then I've misunderstood what the legislation was that you were referring to. If it did refer to that kind of activity, then yes, it would have been of interest to individuals.
Okay, and knowing that, it made a demonstration like this outside Parliament an illegal form of protest, didn't it? And that was what was of such concern to protesters at the time.
I can only put what I've actually include on my
So
report.
you don't have any independent recollection of that?
Just
as
what's on
being
this
a big
report
issue?
here, yeah.
This event, we can see that your report is about efforts to publicise the demonstration, but it was a well-publicised demo, wasn't it, at the time?
It was or it wasn't?
A well-publicised demo.
Well, they certainly made efforts to publicise it, yes.
And did that include handing out leaflets and other forms of publication?
I believe
or
so.
Publicising?
Including a map that had been put together that was to be handed out that suggested points where people could meet up and then decide if they wanted to take part in an action of some kind.
But despite the level of publication or advertising, you were expecting low numbers to attend. Is that fair?
At this time, reading through this, I can't see a specific mention of any particular numbers or an estimate as to potential numbers.
Can we have a look at, it's the witness statement the second witness statement of Ben Leamy. It's UCPI 38002, page 55, please. And looking in particular at paragraphs 291 to 297. And what this sets out is a thread in relation to this event of Sack Parliament. That you were engaged with on the Urban 75 forum.
Okay.
So looking at that, the issue is that knowing that protest was illegal under the new SOCPA legislation, you did try to get help to organise and fund it and promote it. And as we can see in paragraph 292, you encouraged people to turn up to the event. Is that fair to say?
I think it's fair that within the context of my legend on that environment, it would have been strange if I hadn't commented on the Sack the Parliament event.
And is it right to say that you were encouraging people to attend, come along, join in, even though there had been some criticism about this event from other activists?
Well, the key point there in 291 is genuine activists. I mean, my question there for Leamy would be, how would you define what a genuine activist is or is not? And clearly within the context of Urban 75, you have people there with a range of different political opinions and persuasions.
And knowing what we know about not being an Asian provocateur, did you have any concerns about your posting on this site about encouraging people to turn up and be involved in something that is actually deemed a criminal act under the new legislation?
No.
Did you give it any thought at all about your involvement in that?
Sorry, forgive me. I would have seen this as more as being about advertising the fact of the event taking place, not encouraging people to take part in an illegal undertaking.
So paragraph 293, where you respond, come along and find out, would you accept that that is encouraging people to come along and partake?
It's encouraging people to come along. It's interesting that Leamy says he knew the protest would be illegal. Clearly, he then obviously knew what was going on inside my mind.
Did you recognise that it would be illegal, though? Was that part of the issue as to why that demo was being criticised?
Possibly from outside, but the issue for me was to try and publicise this and to get people involved. It would have looked stranger if I hadn't put this out there as part of my involvement within the group. It would have raised questions if I hadn't been part of the effort to publicise this.
And why was that specifically a part of your role? Is that something that you put yourself forward for to publicise events like this,
I
and
think
to encourage people to
I think
be
that
involved?
would be how most activists would see their responsibility for some things that they could put out there in the public domain, other things they would not.
We know that about 150 protesters turned up to the event, but there were about 800 officers deployed to police it. It's a significant ratio there between officers and demonstrators. Do you get the sense that any of your reporting affected what the police did on the day in terms of their policing of the event?
I mean, that's possible. But I certainly would have been involved in any of the discussions that took place in terms of the numbers of police that might be required, resourcing, that kind of thing.
It's understood that many people, if not all people, were detained and questioned and had to give their details to the police. Is that something that you were aware of at the time?
No.
Did you attend the event
I
itself?
did, yes.
And were you detained and questioned by police? When I say detained, I don't mean taken to the custody
No.
area, but
No.
stopped in the street.
No. What had happened is various activists from SOE had spread themselves out throughout the square, and a FIT team identified me, and they then followed me round, and I then spent most of the time then moving around, being followed around by a FIT team and trying to draw them away from the Parliament Square.
And in terms of the effect that the FIT team had on protesters' experiences of demonstrations, was it a very invasive form of policing to follow somebody around with cameras and videos, as I understand it?
I think the view would be, the MPS view would be that the forward intelligence team was a very useful team that was available to them, that they knew protesters were aware of, and they likely knew that the FIT team would call the presence, just by being present, they would make the protesters feel uncomfortable, potentially. So they were there to dissuade by their very presence.
Dissuade what?
Possibly from protesters undertaking direct action.
Were they also, by their presence, dissuading people from participating in just political demonstrations?
Well, I think the FIT team, the awareness of the FIT team, of the general public, is likely very different from the awareness of the FIT team as understood by activists. It's far more likely, let me clarify that, an activist is far more likely to be dissuaded by the presence of a FIT team, potentially, than a member of the public who, when they see the FIT team, might not actually understand who they are, what their function is.
We can see at paragraph 297 of Ben Leamy's statement that the Sack Parliament debacle had a major chilling event and was perceived as a significant blow for democratic freedoms. And with hindsight, the new understanding of the role of secret police, it's probably even worse than initially thought. Did you have that sense at the time that the Sack Parliament event wasn't a success from the activists' point of view?
My recollection is it was viewed differently by different protesters. Some had viewed it as being a success by the fact that people had attended, others perhaps less so.
What about the fact that it was so heavily policed? Did that have a chilling effect on the rights of demonstrators?
I can't comment on that.
You weren't arrested. Did you know any of the people that were arrested that day?
I can't recall, no.
Was part of the role of SDS undercover officers to try and diminish the impact of protest? Was that seen as a goal of SDS policing?
To report on it, yes.
But to
diminish it, that's going to be difficult in the context of what are the actions that the officer is undertaking whilst they're undercover. By their very presence, do they take part and contribute to an action, or do they not? And that obviously can then have an impact potentially on the effectiveness of an action.
Can we have up, please, MPS 0526935? And again, this is one of the composites of your RIPA authorisations, which I recognise you haven't seen. Page 114, please. This is behind tab B54 in bundle 3. And we can see this is in relation to you, your reporting, customer comments from CDesk. See halfway down, paragraph 2. It's related to the Sack the Parliament demonstration on the 9th of October. And it talks about people deliberately intending to flout the new SOCPA legislation in respect of protests within the designated area. And this led to confrontation with the police and a significant number of arrests. However, the effect was blunted through good intelligence, much of it from CW, Commonweal, which allowed Gold to have a good picture of activists' intentions, capabilities, etc. So, from this, can it be inferred that your reporting was fed into Gold Command, and what part of it, or do you accept that?
It seems from... Again, I didn't write this, but it seems fairly clear that the reporting that I provided was obviously utilised and fed through and disseminated to other parts of the organisation, the MPS.
And what's your impression then of how that may have impacted the level of policing in terms of when you turned up to Parliament Square, there were 800 police officers policing the event. Was that a surprise to you?
I think on the day, that wasn't something I considered. I had a fit team that were chasing me around.
So you were distracted, you weren't considering the amount of policing?
Yeah, I had a fit team that followed me around for a considerable time.
You weren't considering at the time the amount of money your reporting may have saved the Met in terms of policing that event?
No, I would have had far too much to consider other than that fact at the time.
In terms of there being 800 officers deployed to police 150 protesters, making 38 arrests, do you think that there was a money-saving value to that event?
I wouldn't comment on that.
Is there any sense that you have now of what would have happened if no such undercover intelligence had been fed through to Gold Command? Can you tell us whether there would have been a difference or not?
I don't know, potentially.
Can we have a look at MPS 007-0264, please? This is behind tab C105 in bundle 5. A report of the 9th of October 2006, and it relates to state of emergency training sessions for Sack Parliament. So this is in the run-up to that event. We can see in paragraph 1, you're talking, or you're reporting, about great disappointment of the SEC activists that nobody attended the training other than the activists themselves. Do you recall reporting that?
I don't recall reporting it, but I can clearly see that appears to be what I've written.
Do you recall whether you were one of the people that was at the training session?
Possibly. The reporting would suggest that I was there.
And the second paragraph says that there is a equal disappointment as to the, or a general feeling of disappointment as to the two non-activists attending the Sack Parliament gig, which was held on Friday, the 6th of October 2006 at the Rampart Centre. Is that a gig at which you were DJing?
I don't recall.
Would it have been your disappointment that actually you weren't able to encourage more people to come along to a training event or to the social fundraising event?
No, that wouldn't have been a concern.
Can we have a look, please, at Asa Winstanley's exhibit, UCPI 38560, page 54. And what I'm going to ask you about is reading up from the bottom to the top. We've got an email from you about an event in Brixton that you were trying to organise that had a capacity for about 550 people. The marquee outside, another 200 people, and the cost of such an event.
Okay.
And you talk about involving Zaytoon, which we know was the company of, or the organisation of that Atif Chowdhury was involved with, and the PSC.
Palestine Solidarity Campaign.
And you're looking for them to be involved to support and share the cost.
From this, it looks as if, yes, to share the cost of the event.
Scrolling up then, we can see that you say another email. You say, further to this, such and such called today and wanted to know what the situation was regarding this event, i.e. is it going to take place, or are we interested, or does anyone give a fuck? Any feedback, peeps, would be good. And what you're trying to gauge there is interest in having a big event like this.
No, what I'm trying to gauge there is the likelihood of people attending.
Okay. Somebody does reply back to you and say, you know, I would be interested, but actually I've got other things on. And then at the top of the page, we can see your email that says, I appreciate the feedback, especially as I believe it's important that we as a group begin to organise such events on a regular basis, if only to explore the fundraising possibilities and expansion of our support base. Incidentally, paragraph 3, I would like to propose that the group explores the possibility of taking the design from a recent flyer, which shows in a very clear and easily understandable way the impact of Israel continuing to annex more and more Palestinian territory and transferring this to a T-shirt, what peeps think. And so you're looking to organise and involve people in campaigning and that sort of thing. Is that fair to say?
I think what I'm doing there is I'm looking to think about the activities that I will be undertaking as an activist, according to my legend, being involved within these groups.
Can we have a look at page 152, please? And this is you forwarding an email from the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign regarding a National Day of Action. And that's on boycotting Israeli goods.
Yeah.
And this is an email from the 22nd of the 6th, 2006. And what you say at the very top there is, so are we going to get involved or are we going to sit on our butts? And the inference being that the first is positive, the second option is negative. You're wanting to encourage people to become involved in this National Day of Action. Is that fair enough?
I'm opening it up as a question for discussion within the group.
Page 173, please. About a month and a half later, we have the
Sorry, I'm still on page 168, I believe.
Oh.
I've got 168 on the bottom of this document here.
Yeah, is that 2nd of August 2006? Hang on, we've got 100 and... Oh, sorry, it might be internal page. 157, please. Yeah, it's internal, page 173. And again, it's about organising, and at the bottom of paragraph 2, you can see you suggest that I think it would be great if we could take part in some capacity, whether that's with a banner or something else.
But again, opening this up as a question, as would be expected of an activist within that environment.
And that if the last sentence is, if peeps are interested in arranging something, let me know. Did you take it upon yourself within the group to be a bit of a coordinator?
I was certainly a coordinator in terms of fundraising events, yes.
What about involvement in campaigns and other actions?
What specifically, who was this addressed to? Is it ISMers or?
This is within the ISM group.
So the issue here then, it would have been put up as just a general question. It would have been entirely their choice whether they chose to get involved or not.
In terms of this going up on Indomedia, is that a public website and that publicised events? This is something that, if anybody needed to know about it, somebody could have a look at that, just with the public access.
I think I recall at the time that it was a public-facing website, or most of it was public-facing, and it was utilised by some activists, some groups, to put up details of events. But obviously, because it was public-facing, not all the information pertaining to those events would necessarily be made public within that space.
Can we have a look at page 174, please? Sorry, 158. And again, you're flagging things, 2 fundraising events or benefit nights over at the Rampart this weekend. People might be interested in attending. And noting that you're going to be playing there too, encouraging people to come along.
Open it up as a question for people to consider.
Can we have a look at page 161, please? And this is an email from 16th of February 2007. And this addresses something a bit more about the overall strategic direction of ISM London, encouraging moving focus away from facilitating activists going to Palestine and towards potentially arrestable direct actions in the UK.
Sorry, I'm just going to read through the
Sure.
page. Okay.
So it's really just the third paragraph in that top email from you. Starting perhaps the underlying issue here is what ISM is for and how it expects to operate here in the UK. Are people interested in engaging in accountable actions here? And my own view is that we could and should be doing much more here in the UK. There are enough targets worthy of our attention, and quite frankly, they are being left alone to continue without being directly challenged. Agrexco is a great example of this, and that was the food importing company, wasn't it?
Which had been identified by a member, someone who identified as Gus.
Okay.
It's been involved in the importation business from Israel.
Okay, and Agrexco was the subject of direct actions and protests.
Yes.
Quite significantly over the years that we're looking at during the course of your deployment, is that fair?
Having been identified by someone associated very closely to ISM, yes.
Is it fair to say that the owners of Agrexco, or the people that were managing it, I understand it was based out in Middlesex?
Yes.
In Hayes, in
Uxbridge, I
Middlesex.
think.
And they didn't want to press charges. People would go, demonstrate, do lock-ons as part of direct action, but nothing seriously, no serious offences in relation to those demos. Is that fair to say?
Well, I can certainly recall attending on one particular protest, and the activists walked in onto the estate of Agrexco, whereby a member of the security staff walked up and grabbed hold of me by the neck and then marched me backwards off of the premises.
That was you went through the gates, did
Yes.
you, onto the premises?
Yeah.
And the security guards?
Have come up, one of them came up, grabbed hold of me around the neck, squeezed, and I put my hands up and said, I'm not protesting, walked backwards. Other activists had gone round, and they were then starting to do whatever they wanted to do once they were on the estate. That was down to them individual choices as to what they might then choose to do.
But no serious public order or criminal offences arising out of those actions, at least in your reporting of those.
Well, this
actions
isn't an actual
against
report
Agrexco.
about it. This is a discussion around this issue. And I would imagine, looking at this, I suspect that this is to do with ISM and an individual within ISM, other than me, who'd identified, was originally responsible for the identification of Carmel Agrexco as the importer, is importing goods from Israel into the UK.
But in February 2007, you are encouraging people to become more involved in these sorts of actions rather than just the
I was
backwards and
opening up as a
forwards
question of potential collaboration with the ISM and also other groups. There was crossover between them, obviously.
Do you recognise that could be seen as encouraging people to become involved in potentially criminal activity?
I think this is largely going out to activists. From looking at this is not going out beyond an activist group.
No. But the question remains, were you encouraging activists then
No,
to
I
become
was
more
opening up as a
involved
question as part of maintaining my legend within the activism world. These are questions that would be considered, that would be normal for activists operating in that realm.
And you're raising this as an issue that could be discussed at the next meeting?
As something that could be discussed at a meeting.
Can we have a look, please, at... moving on to an entirely different topic. MPS 071 7373. And this is just about private information in relation to some of the people that you reported on. This is a report from the 8th of October 2006. It's a report about an address where females live, and we've got the names of those people identified under the privacy redaction if you need. But it relates to the fact that you've been round to an address. It's an upper floor flat. To enter the flat, you say, an individual enters from the street, and you describe the internal layout of that flat. And then immediately facing the entrance door is a narrow staircase, and you note where the bedrooms are in relation to the flat. It's number 38 if you need it on the cipher list.
Yeah.
And you note also that the ground floor flat is occupied by nurses, and it appears from the last paragraph that you entered that flat as part of a party. You've
Yes.
been invited round and entered that private residential premises as one of approximately 20 to 25 people being at a house party.
Yes.
And why was it that you reported on the internal layout of a house that was lived in by two women, and noting where their bedrooms were, and that going into a report for Special Branch?
Because as you can see from that, it's not about the bedrooms, it's about the general layout of the property, where these individuals who are involved in state of emergency were living. That's why that was reported in.
But why was that of interest, do you think?
So that the officers back at the yard could understand where these individuals were living and the conditions in which they were living.
Can we have a look at the comment section, please, of this report? In terms of the threat, the level of threat posed by those involved in state of emergency, we can see that it's a joke, obviously, about a test to determine if a single Pringle would fit into a toaster. That's the level of threat, and there was laughter in relation to that. Were you putting that into this report as a joke in itself?
No, it's just reporting on what had happened.
Was the inference that actually these people who you are reporting on are of no threat to public order or public safety in reality?
I'm just reporting on what had happened in the event, or at the event, sorry.
But in terms of what you report in the main body of the report, would you accept that this appears to be more of a threat to the safety of young women, a report like this going into a Special Branch report?
How?
Because it's determining where these young women live, how to access the building, where their bedrooms are, and it just seems a bit, would you accept it seems creepy?
No, I don't accept that at all.
What was the policing benefit of having this report
As I've already explained,
on the SDS books?
As I've already explained, they would have had an understanding of where those members of state of emergency lived and also their living conditions.
Can we have a look at MPS 007 1249? 007 1249. And this is behind tab C 110. It's a report from the 17th of November 2006 in relation to a Justice for Cleaners, Transport and General Workers Union Justice for Cleaners campaign. It's right, isn't it, that this was a long-running campaign in support of migrant workers?
I don't recall.
If we run through the report, we can see that it lists all the planned protests outside companies that use the contractor ISS. And the reason for that is because ISS as a cleaning company was using migrant workers as employees. So it's quite a long report. We can see from page 5, paragraph 3, that all these events, all these protests outside these big companies are advertised at a No Borders meeting. And was that an open meeting, or would that have been an open meeting?
I'm not certain you would regard it as an open meeting, because I think if someone had come there who was not part of No Borders, there may have been some suspicions.
Anybody from the union or migrant workers themselves, because they have attended that meeting?
I recall there may have been an individual there who may have had some form of link to the unions because of the use of the building.
Is it the sort of meeting that a plainclothes detective could have attended?
Plainclothes detective, and they arrive and they announce that they are a detective, or they go there and don't announce they're a detective?
I would suggest don't announce and actually just pick up the information that they're able to gather from the meeting.
I think, with my experience of this, that they would likely be, if they were not known, they would probably be regarded with some suspicion.
These protests, though, would they be advertised around the localities where they were going to be held?
I can't comment on that.
The purpose of the campaign was to raise awareness, wasn't it? So can it be reasonably inferred that there would be some publication around
Possibly.
the events? And so what sort of information were you providing that wouldn't otherwise be available publicly?
I'm reporting the fact that there possibly been protests, and I can't say that you would not have had protests and activists may not have wished to attend those events.
And no reasonable expectation of disorder or crime arising out of these events? I
wouldn't have been able to say. I was just reporting on the fact of the actual fact of these points taking place in the future.
Can we have a look at MPS 007 1366, please? This is one of the blockades of Agrexco Carmel, the importing company based in Middlesex. Reports from the 27th of November 2006. And this is a post-event report, is that right? So the events happened and you're reporting on it.
Yeah, it would appear to be so, yes.
And is there a page 2 to this report? We can see it, paragraphs 4 and 5 of page 2, that effectively all passed off without much disorder, all concluded by 11 o'clock in the morning. Local police attended, but protesters had been able to make their voices heard and seen, and then the event moves off, people go home or go to a local pub.
I mean, that would certainly be the case, but I think the important thing to note here would also be the fact that you've got activists from different parts, from Brighton and London, coming together. They have a shared interest, principally around the issue of Israel-Palestine, the occupied territories, and it's bringing them together.
Was that generally the scenario in these sorts of direct actions and protests? Would that be the sort of thing you would expect to happen at these sorts of events?
What do you mean by the sort of thing?
That there would be some form of action, fairly low level in terms of any public disorder or civil offence, criminal offence, if at all, and then that would be the event over with and people go home.
Not necessarily, because you would often have other occasions when activists would agree as to who would be arrested and who wouldn't be arrested. So it would depend on the activists themselves. And again, there's also the fact of once an activity takes place, it remains fluid, and choices can be made that may not have been made at that moment in time, not previously.
Given that this was such an event where nothing seems to have been occurred that would have been of interest to Special Branch, what was the point of reporting this?
As I mentioned earlier, I think that the important thing here is just reporting the fact of there being an action, and the fact that you had these individuals with this shared interest coming together, That would be of interest to Special Branch, because we would want to consider whether there was any trace of these activists having previously associated, and whether this was indicative of any future actions or potential actions arising out of such a relationship.
Was it understood that actually some of the actions involved activists who wanted to be arrested so that they could have a day in court and raise awareness about the activities of the company?
That's quite possible.
That was part of the objective, actually, to be arrested.
For some, for some occasion that could be the case.
But certainly not engaging in any terrorist means to do that.
Well, this would fall under public order.
Okay. Can we have a look, please, at MPS 0071721? And this looks at ISM London plans for 2007. And you note in the second paragraph on page 1, that the group has reduced, consisting of Charlotte Carson and a number of other individuals, including MCD. And unsurprisingly, this extremely small activist base limits significantly the impact of ISM in London. Page 2, please. You say that it's somewhat mysterious that it's still financially viable and has still been able to financially support Asa Winstanley to the tune of several £100s. Is it also somewhat mysterious as to why you are still reporting on ISM by this stage, 2006, 2 years into your deployment?
I think, as we previously discussed, there was a decision made that my reporting would widen. So, again, I'm not certain of the dates, but it's quite clear that this may have been part of a watching brief whilst I was also reporting on other groups.
I think that's right. In terms of the chronology, from about spring, summer 2006, you start to look at No Borders.
No Borders and then State of Emergency.
And then State of Emergency. But we're now looking at December 2006.
So I'm maintaining the watching brief.
Okay. And part of that is talking about the capabilities of ISM London, is it?
Well, that, according to this report, would suggest that it's a watching brief, and what I'm doing is I'm providing an update as I'm able to report on the position of the group with regard to the fact of people travelling to Palestine.
And a watching brief wouldn't then, in your view, necessarily just mean only if there's something of particular interest should you then report on them?
No, it would be to maintain it and to report on inaction as much as action.
Can we have a look, please, at MPS 0072007? And this is in relation to No Borders, Harmondsworth demo, and it's a planning meeting. On page 2 of the report, at paragraphs 5 to 6, reference is made to the involvement of John McDonnell, an MP, and at least the fact that he might be invited to come and speak at the demonstration, and whether there should be an opportunity for people within the group to engage with him, and a discussion around the appropriateness of his involvement. Again, whilst it's not reporting directly on McDonnell, it's not reporting on his activity, the fact that he was involved in such a demonstration like this, did you feel that that was important to put it into a report?
I would have done, yes.
And why wasn't that excluded, do you say, on the basis that you shouldn't be reporting on members of Parliament?
I would have reported, as you've seen previously, I obviously included details on Jeremy Corbyn. And this is about the potential of something happening.
On page 4 of the report, paragraph 2, paragraph 2, you make reference, it's the paragraph just above, in terms of reference to legal representation and who would be contacted on the day if it was needed. That reference to legal representation going into a special branch report, why did you include that?
Because it would have been that's clearly part of the discussions that were taking place relating to this event. So I would have reported on it.
And did you not consider that that shouldn't really be part of the report because it could touch on legally privileged sorts of information?
This is touching on the fact of the particular group that may have been utilised. It's not speaking of or disclosing legally privileged information.
Did you have any sense that certain desks within Special Branch were interested in legal representation, certain firms or solicitors?
Not as a specific issue, no. This would have been reported in terms of a possible event that was coming up, likely to go back to C Squad.
And paragraph 3, publicity. Many groups are going to be contacted prior to the demonstration with a view to participating and publicising the event. Again, would this sort of event be a widely publicised protest and demo?
It seems to be indicating that might be the case.
So again, local police would be aware of it?
Potentially.
Without your
they would be aware. I think it's worth noting there is a difference between being aware of a demonstration taking place potentially if it's been publicised in open fora, and the fact that you may have activists attending who might not announce in open fora or on open fora what their intentions may or may not be on the day. And furthermore, if I can just add this, forgive me, the fact that you've got, that, to my memory, that doesn't look correct, that particular company. But the very fact that that's being raised in advance of the event taking place could be taken as being indicative of the fact that there may well have been an intention by some activists to undertake activities that might have resulted in their arrest, whereby they may then have required representation.
And particularly noting the name of the solicitor's firm, though, you felt that that was important?
Just because I believe I know the firm that actually that's referring to, and that's obviously an incorrect spelling.
MPS 007-1839, behind tab C119, I think you've referred to earlier in your evidence yesterday. It's MPS 007-1839. Where you were asked to have a look at some photographs, public order photographs of people who attended that demonstration at Harmondsworth. And how did that work in practice? Were you asked to come into Scotland Yard and look at these, or
I imagine
how did it work?
It could have worked a number of ways. It certainly would be the case that I would not go into NSY.
Okay.
So it would have been quite possible that a meeting would have been arranged either possibly at a hotel, where I would then meet desk officers and they would then present me with material and then ask me questions. Or the other way would be they would send it through to the back office by way of the reporting sergeants, who would then be able to, and they were travelling, of course, between NSY and other locations.
And in terms of who you were identifying as being present at these events, the demonstrations outside of Harmondsworth arose out of legitimate concerns of members of the public about the conditions of detention and the fact of detention centres. Is that Is that right?
I assume so, yes.
And nothing unlawful in relation to...
Well, again, the issue
that.
the issue here comes down to the fact that you've got members of No Borders who were wishing to attend, per the previous reporting, and the fact that they are discussing whether or not they should have legal representation contacted before a demonstration at this location.
Can we have a look, please, at MPS 0072398, report behind tab C121, dated 2nd of February 2007, state of emergency, March 19th, day of action, the M19 meeting. So this is an open meeting held at the London Action Resource Centre to discuss the next stage in arranging and developing activities for the proposed M19 day of action. And paragraph page 3, if we can have a look at that. Paragraph 1 on page 3 talks about the failure of state of emergency to build an effective activist network around the concept of M19 at that stage.
Okay.
So, communication around this, organisation around this, not coming to very much at this stage.
It would appear not from this reporting.
Okay, yet we've got a fairly full report from you in relation to that. Likely to be a very small affinity group that's involved in M19 activity. Is this an example of negative reporting? This isn't going to be a big event. This isn't going to be something massive that public order police really need to know about in the city.
This would be
going to
about providing as much information as I was able to at the time.
Did you raise any concern at this stage with SDS management about reporting on this group, given the low level of any potential threat that they posed?
I don't believe so. If there was a problem with my reporting, I would have expected it to have been communicated to me by SDS management.
Can we have a look then at MPS 007 2399? Again, another state of an emergency meeting. On page 2, the comment is that SOE has chosen to concentrate on small-scale actions, with the emphasis placed on involving only trusted fellow activists. It is also a tacit admission that an attempt to organise a large-scale event, such as SAC Parliament, is not within the current capabilities of the collective. And in light of that, would that indicate that this sort of organisation was not something that should have been a target of SDS reporting?
No, I would take the view here that you have a group of individuals who are clearly looking to there's clearly concern. I appear to be reporting a concern in regard to group security. That means as that becomes smaller, the chances are that you're dealing with an ever more dedicated group of individuals who are sticking around to take part in those activities, who are trusted.
MPS 007 2503 is a report, again on the Harmondsworth IRC demo. small number of, page 2, paragraph 3. C127 is the tab number. So a low level of uniformed police officers present at the site of the demonstration. And a small cordoned area for people to demonstrate in, but not really enforced. But paragraph 4 indicates that the demonstration nevertheless proceeded with a little incident, and in paragraph 5, once the demo was over, the protesters marched back to coaches. I can see...
Sorry, excuse me.
I can see that might have been quite hard for you to read, given each of the paragraphs were highlighted at different stages, but if you were able to...
Which particular part would you wish me to concentrate on?
Page 2, please. Paragraphs 3, 4 and 5.
So after an uneventful journey, onwards from that point?
Yeah.
Okay.
In your experience, was it sometimes the case that it was over-policing that led to the disorder? And this is an example of a small-scale police presence, protest is conducted as it would expect to have been from the activists involved, and then people go home.
I wouldn't comment on that.
In your experience as been involved with activist groups, have you seen that happen where heavy-handed, large-scale policing does lead to disorder, where in other circumstances, had there not been so many police there may not have been the disorder?
I don't recall being personally involved in that, no.
Okay. So I note the time, that may be an appropriate place to stop.
Certainly. So that the witness in particular knows how much longer approximately we're going to take the best part of tomorrow, are we not?
Yes.
Yes. Afraid you've got another day to go, but by then it should be over.
No, that's fine. I'm here to obviously help.
Yes. Very well, until 10 tomorrow.